Hi, I'm Keith Ghostland.
I'm Linda Quinlan.
I'm Ann Charles.
Welcome back, Ann Charles.
Returning. And before we begin, I'd like to thank the substitute excellent co-hosts, Kim Ward and Susan Loyne. They really did great jobs, and I appreciate their coming in and substituting for me. Now, you are watching All Things LGBTQ, which we're taping at Orca Media, which we know is located in Montpelier, Vermont, which is unceded indigenous land. So we're ready to go with some local and regional news with Keith.
And it's so good to have you back.
Well, thank you.
And I'm waiting for the first time we sort of spar back and forth about stories and really? Welcome home. So I'm going to start by looking at the correct camera. And this week's trivia question, and they got it.
Half and half.
I'm giving them full credit. August 1976, UCLA, they released the results of a major study that they had just completed. The study focused on lesbian mothers. What was their big revelation? So,
I was one.
What we all knew.
Never mind.
For events, Contra Dance is back.
All right.
It actually started last Saturday, Montpelier Grange. It is gender neutral calling. And this was the program that our dear friend Aaron Marcus had worked so hard to put in place. So if you are interested, please go on the Capital City or Capital City Grange site to get the details. A donation is welcomed but not necessary, and they are using COVID precautions. So if you arrive and you need a mask, they will have one for you.
Good.
So the rest of this sort of introductory session, we just finished a primary. And oh my, wasn't it an interesting night. But before I get to Vermont, today is New York's Democratic primary, and it's just the Democratic Party. Two people were watching, Mondaire Jones, which is a new district in Brooklyn. And then and that's the 10th district now. But we're also watching the 21st district, which is Plattsburgh, and particularly Matt Patori, who is gay activist attorney whose campaign ad definitely got my attention when his tag is, "I'm not going to kiss Trump's ass, I'm going to protect yours." Truth in politics. There we go. So in Vermont, this was the second highest turnout for a primary. And the real fast overview is Vermont has like 500,000 voters. They counted 133,578. Of that number, 102,408 were in the Democratic primary.
Nice.
And there were only 610 votes statewide in the Progressive primary. Now, I'm pointing that out because some of the numbers might look better for some of our Democratic LGBTQ out candidates, because if you compared districts where there was an out candidate and they had an opposition, the numbers for the Democrats was so much higher than the Republicans, it made you think, ooh, this may be really good in their district during the general election. I think that the Becca Molly race really pulled, and based on Becca's campaign's outreach, really pulled out our community to vote. And the Republicans really stayed home because there wasn't really a race that engaged them.
And if I may speak about Becca's support, it was really striking because, true confess, full disclosure, I did a phone bank and all the facilitators and organizers were in their, 18. And then I talked to a friend who was in her 80s who said she drove around and delivered signs. I mean, it was such a range of supporters. I'm delighted that she was able to carry the day.
I drove people to the polls on primary day. So it was, okay, but looking at sort of down the ticket, Becca got over 60% of the Democratic vote. And the number of blank ballots in that race was the lowest number of any of the primary races. So people showed up to vote in that race. Because some of the other races where there was only one candidate or one or two, actually looking at the lieutenant governor's race, there was a significantly higher number of blank ballots. So they showed up to support. So now it's on to the general election. And as we know, Isaac Evans Franz, who was running in the Democratic primary for Senate against Peter Welch, did not win that race. Unfortunately, Witchy R2 in Windham County's Senate race was not one of the two top vote getters, and there were only 2 seats. Brian Campion, who is going to be our only out member of the Senate, did win in their race. Going down through, we have Kathleen James in Bennington 4, who she's the incumbent. The other incumbent are both running. There is one Republican opposition, but the numbers look really good in Kathleen's favor. Tiff Bumel in Chittenden County has no opposition. Brian Chena in Chittenden County, House race, also has no opposition. Emma Mulvaney Stanek has no opposition. Taylor Small, that's a 2-person district, has no opposition.
Right. Well, there we go.
Okay, Brenda Churchill, though, Franklin 6. Brenda got a significant number of votes on the Democratic primary, much more than the Republican incumbent. But again, this is where I caution that there was really nothing to pull out people from the Republican Party to vote in this primary. So I think Brenda has a really good chance of carrying her district, but she's going to need involvement for our community to get across. Kate Donnelly, she and the other incumbent are both running. They're nominal opposition. Emily Kornhauser has no opposition. Heather Supernot has no opposition. And you found the 2 write-ins from the Franklin Grand Isle District, Josie Levitt and Annie Barbazon. They both got significant numbers of votes for write-ins, so they have an aggressive campaign. However, they're going up against a Republican incumbent. It's a 2-seat district. One of the Republicans is running again, one isn't. But this was Mitzi Johnson's district that flipped from Democratic to Republican during the last election. So this is one that we would definitely want to watch. And again, all of these numbers look really good. It looks as though we are energized and we are ready to get out there. But looking at the results from the Republican Party, from their primary, they were all over the place. They had moderate, which would seem reasonable, Republicans who won their primaries, but there were also several alt-right candidates that took their particular primaries, and one of them was actually at the January 6th insurrection.
Yes.
It was a piece of information that was put out into, part of the political debate, and they still got elected. There is a candidate in southern Vermont who is seen as being part of the alt-right. The Republican Party is not really supporting them, but they're still going to be on the ballot. If they won the primary, who showed up to vote and what are they representing? So,
Well, it's really, I think that people are probably going to get out to vote in huge numbers given Roe versus Wade and all that stuff. So we can hope that there is a change on the horizon. Well, there's an all-girls prep school in Nashville, which has paused letting gender diversity policy pass. Harpeth Hall announced new policy in an email to parents saying any student who identifies as a girl may apply to the school. This caused such backlash from parents, and an online petition with over 1,000 signatures caused the school to pause their letting all girls in the school. The alumni called for the school's leadership to resign and threatened to withhold financial contributions. So, a Florida school sent an aggressive email comparing homosexuality to incest and bestiality to parents, letting them know that if their kids come out, they will be kicked out of school.
And Florida's got primaries today, too.
Yes.
And that
Oh,
should
that's
be a
true.
really interesting outcome to see if there's any opposition
They
to all
said
this
that Demings may
craziness.
have a chance.
I would hope so.
But,
And
you
I
know,
would-
they'll probably steal it away from her if she wins.
I would
just like in
you mean
Georgia.
Val Demings?
Yes.
Wouldn't that be wonderful?
Wouldn't that be great? Bye, Mark. In Florida's gay neighborhood, Wilton Manors, a man was tackled to the ground after he pulled out a grenade at the bar, the corner pub. It started when a man walked into the bar around 9 and set the grenade down on the bar. Bar regular former Marine Darrell Darling heard the conversation about the grenade and moved to help. While patrons escaped while he was talking to the guy, he said, hey, let's go outside and talk about our history in the military. When he got outside, he threw the man to the ground where police took him away. The grenade, as it turns out, was a dud.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
I was thinking my question was going to be, was this a live grenade or just a prop?
Well, they thought that it might be, but...
Well, of course, sure.
And this is, I don't have the website for this, but anybody who wants to look it up, a gay realtor launches a website to help LGBTQ people flee Texas. It's called Flee Texas if you're interested in, Free Texas if you're interested in fleeing Texas. So apparently they will help you find houses and living arrangements elsewhere. Trans youth athletes in Utah can now return to competing in high school sports after a judge temporarily blocks the state's anti-trans ban. The ruling came after 3 trans girls challenged the state's ban. The judge ruled the ban unconstitutional and discriminatory, and that students didn't have, and that he didn't see that any of the trans students had an advantage in the sports. So. Trevor Campbell confirms his sexuality and opens up about his life and career and confronting anti-gay bias. The 90s R&B star has publicly told about his sexuality and his hope for the future of queer black artists in the music industry that still is rife with the anti-gay discrimination. As a 90s teen superstar with hits like Can We Talk and I'm Ready, he's become a cultural icon for the black community. And right in our backyard, and I know this is regional, but I don't know if you have it or not, but a New Hampshire Libertarian group, do you have that one? No, anyway.
No.
A New Hampshire Libertarian group tweeted a list of churches classifying them by how woke they were. Being LGBTQ friendly, COVID conscious, or having a Ukrainian flag displayed was considered woke.
Is that a pejorative?
Yes. Woke culture is the alt-right's definition for, oh, you're acknowledging your privilege.
Sort of like politically correct used to be.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. So this is an anti-woke.
Oh, I see.
And they want to give you all the names of all the churches and everybody, so, you know, they can go and, I don't know, demonstrate or whatever.
Or go and attend.
Yeah. Gay black men are terrified in the aftermath of an Ole Miss murder. In Mississippi, authorities in Oxford said that the disappearance of Jimmy J. Lee, an out black student at the University of Mississippi, was an isolated case. A Lafayette County judge determined that there was probable cause for police to hold Sheldon Harrington, a 22-year-old accused of the murder, and should be held without bail. Prosecutors say Harrington's motive was that he was afraid of being outed. So, all right. And let's see. Oh, this is kind of interesting. I thought you might like this. The Great Gatsby gets a queer-centered retelling. Non-binary author Jeremy Holt reinvents Fitzgerald's classic. It's an 8-issue graphic novel series. So, okay, and you might want to look that one up.
You may have to put it on the list for next year's birthday.
Yeah.
And speaking of literature, at the end of my headlines, I'm going to return to the Lambda Literary Award winners that I started listing before I had that untimely absence, or timely or necessary absence. But in Argentina, and I didn't include this because it's very esoteric, but in Argentina, there's a book group that's been meeting for like 30 years, reading In Search of Lost Time, the Proust collection of novels. I think it's 7 novels, and they've been meeting for years, and their average age is over 70.
And so they're just reading this one book?
Well, it's a series of 7 books.
Still 30 years.
But I thought
It's Proust,
people aren't really
please.
going to be interested. It's kind of quirky, though.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to Europe first, where thousands call on Russia to demand the repeal, to ban barbaric conversion therapy. If we don't, it will lead to death. There's a lot of signatures being presented to Putin. It's a little short of the 5,000 required, but I doubt that much will happen. Now I have a really exciting story that I'm going to return to. It's about Tom Daley, whom we know as the out sports figure from the UK, and his activities at the Commonwealth Games, but also he's released a documentary called Illegal to Be Me, and I'm going to talk about that at length in my next segment. A German diplomat, this is a sad story, was arrested in Brazil for the alleged murder of his husband. And he was denied diplomatic immunity, and what is particularly telling is that he cleaned up the apartment before he called in the report. His name is Uwe Herbert Hahn, and he's going to be held in custody in connection with the murder of his husband in Rio. They said he couldn't have diplomatic immunity and he couldn't have habeas corpus, and all because the event occurred in their home and not in public. He couldn't claim any of those rights. His spouse, a 52-year-old person named Walter Henri Maximilien Biot, 52, was found sort of bludgeoned to death. And there was blood all over the apartment, and that he cleaned it up was the telling piece of evidence that led the police to charge him. And so the Brazilian government and the German government are working closely on the investigation. He was apparently clubbed to death. He says his lover was drunk and fell. So sad.
It's hard to get bludgeoned when you're drunk and fall, but, you know.
Yeah, a wooden club, they suspected, was the instrument. The Isle of Man has finally issued an apology for all its nefarious deeds against gay people. Activists are saying this is long overdue. A 5-page letter to the Isle of Pride group, Gary Roberts, who's the chief constable, makes an apology for his service's institutionalized approach, which caused harm to some people. Homosexuality on the Isle of Man remained imprisonable for decades after the 1962 Sexual Offenses Act, which decriminalized men over 21 in private. The reforms applied only to England and Wales, though, so it wasn't until 1992 that the sodomy laws on the Isle of Man were repealed. An activist said, "I've waited 33 years for this apology. I've got it. Let's call it a day." It follows an announcement in February that men who have been convicted of homosexuality on the Isle of Man would be automatically pardoned. So the Isle of Man is an island in the Irish Sea. May be interested to know.
Which government does it fall under? Irish?
I think it's its own government. It's a British protectorate,
Right.
I think.
Is it okay?
The British Isles, yeah, UK.
Okay. Should we go to a little upbeat news from Germany?
Sure.
In the form of Cocoon, which...
Was that the movie?
That's the movie clip.
I love that movie.
Oh, no, this is another one.
Oh.
It's a lesbian romance, in fact.
The old one was one. They took the old people to another planet.
Well, Nora from Berlin struggles with growing up and her own identity. Her sister and her best friend are only interested in fashion and social media. Nora tries to do the same, but it does not make her happy. Then she meets Romy. Berlin's Kreuzberg is Nora's microcosm. Nora, the silent observer, is always tagging along. At parties, at school, at the pool, on rooftops and in apartments, she drifts around the monotonous housing blocks with her big sister and her friends, witnessing events that seem to crossfade in the summer light. Girls who want to be slim and pretty, boys who say dumb things to promote or because they are in love, to provoke. Ruthless smartphone cameras and fragile teenagers, but Nora has her own way of looking at the world. When she meets Romy, she realizes why. Music is in the air, Nora's body is changing, and caterpillars are spinning their cocoons. Realistic and taking on the protagonist's perspective, this film captures a summer of change. So let's look at the German film.
Where can we see it?
We can see it in festivals. I think it's on YouTube and it's also on Amazon. So let's look at Cocoon.
Jule, bist du glücklich, wenn er ihn in deine Hand nimmt?
Klar,
Und was willst du dann noch von David?
ist doch was ganz anderes.
Auf die Plätze! Fertig! Los!
Ich finde andere Mädchen manchmal so schön. Ich finde es auch schön, wenn ich den Körper von einem anderen Mädchen spüre.
Du bist 14, Nora. Da hat man so viele unterschiedliche Gefühle.
Besetzt! Mach mal auf. Gib mal deine Hose. Ich wasch die aus.
Wer ist denn das?
Das ist die Neue aus der Nachbarsklasse. Die heißt Romy oder so.
Als ich vorhin geschwommen bin, da habe ich was im Wasser gesehen. Es sah wunderschön aus. Ganz so vollgepumpt mit Licht und Wasser. Und als ich es dann hochgeholt habe, da war es so eine einfache Plastiktüte. Stell dir mal vor, so ist es mit einem schön. Es ist da und dann ist es einfach wieder weg. Glaub ich nicht.
Well, that looks interesting.
Yeah. Should I continue with my headlines?
Yeah, for a
I'll
little
read them
bit.
quickly. Global LGBT event canceled after demand to remove Taiwan's name. It was the World Pride event, and it was the international gathering. It was canceled Friday because the government wanted to take Taiwan off the event. And Taiwan has been claimed by China, and that's a big fight. World Pride Taiwan 2025 said that the organizers were asked to change the event to World Pride Kaohsiung, naming the host city instead of the country of Taiwan, so they canceled it.
Another American went there too for some reason recently, besides Pelosi.
Yes. Let's move to Vietnam, that we sometimes don't think about as much as we might. New health ministry orders, it's an order upholding the dignity and non-discrimination of LGBTQ people. They confirmed that same-sex attraction and being transgender are not mental health conditions. Human Rights Watch said today the decision brings Vietnam's health policy in line with global health and human rights standards. But activists say it's the pathologizing of LGBTQ people is still alive and well in the country. And apparently the World Health Organization pathologized us until in 1969, and then in 1992 changed its mind, and Vietnam is just catching up with the program.
Well, we should move to Keith now if you want to wait until your next segment.
Okay.
To start off really quickly, monkeypox. Nationally, there were 15,433 diagnosed cases. We have the most in the world. To bring it home, Vermont will be offering vaccine to people who have had exposure to monkeypox. It's a series of 2 vaccines. It is only effective for until 2 weeks after the second vaccine. Please be in touch with people like the Pride Center, be looking at the Department of Health site. And I'm saying that because I have received phone calls from men who have sex with men who might have called their providers in Barrie, looking at, oh, I will be traveling, I will be attending large Pride events out of state. How can I get a vaccine? And they might have been told by their providers who know their history, oh, you're at absolutely no risk. We have no intentions of doing clinics here in Vermont. You'd only be at risk if you were visiting Africa. We suggest you don't go to Africa. And yes, indeed, formal complaints have been filed.
Oh, wow. Yes.
So moving on to something almost as much fun, the Rutland Fairgrounds, they rent out their space. They rented it to a gun show for which the NAACP chapter filed a complaint because they were selling slavery-related memorabilia such as stockades, cuffing, and both Rutland and its accompanied towns have non-discriminatory inclusionary language, but apparently the fairground itself doesn't have anything specific in their policy.
Well, they need to change that.
Well, that's why the NAACP was reaching out saying, okay, this is not the first time this has happened, and are you looking at the vendors? Vermont Department of Corrections. There was an interview recently with WCAX. There is someone who has been incarcerated long-term, who had been housed at an out-of-state men's facility, who approached the DOC staff and said, I'm transgender. The person was the case was reviewed, which is their protocol. The person was transferred to the women's facility in Burlington, and the Department of Corrections is assisting them through gender affirmation protocols that will include potentially gender affirmation surgeries before they are released from DOC incarceration and custody. So they are stepping up, and from what the new commissioner of DOC has said, this was a medical condition that was diagnosed when this person was in our care and custody. we're responsible for effectively responding to it. So DOC has had lots of problems with their transgender population. They have only 19 people who have identified as being transgendered within our entire system. Not all of them identify as transgender women, but not all of them are in women's facilities. So there is still stuff that needs to happen. Really quickly, Boston Children's Hospital. And this is one of those that you can't make this stuff up. The alt-right put out basically a false report talking about how Boston's Children's Hospital has, a gender specialties clinic. And they do gender affirmation surgeries. And as part of their article, they said, and they admit patients as young as 3 years old, giving the implication that Boston Children's Hospital was performing gender affirmation surgeries on minors, to which they came back and said, we use best practices standards. We do not do surgeries on minors. You have to be 18. You have to be able to make this decision. But there is a specific individual on TikTok who kept putting this report out. And this is also the TikTok user who is really promoting we're grooming our youth. And reportedly, TikTok has prevented them from being able to access their account, but other reports said if you go on TikTok, you can still see all this stuff posted. They may have blocked the user, but they haven't blocked or taken down the material. And sort of going on the alt-right and targeting and trolling, are in Ontario. Clara Sorrenti does a blog, is out there as a member of the transgender community. She was targeted by this alt-right who used her dead name, calling in threats and to 911, and of course law enforcement responded, and then she had to say, wait a minute, I didn't do this. They were able to discover what was happening. And then the trolls, she left her home. She and her partner and their cat left their home because it just wasn't safe. I mean, the police were concerned about how virulent these actions were. And all of a sudden, there were pizzas being delivered to her where she was in hiding, delivered to her using her dead name. And her statement was, basically they're telling me, we know where you are, we know who you are, we have access to you at any point. And the Ontario police have said, if somebody is calling in and doing this, which is a growing protocol with the trolls, both in the US and Canada, they said, it's a 911 call. We have to respond. We do not have an option. We need to investigate. But they said, we are increasingly concerned by the frequency and the tone of the calls and the actions that are going on.
Can I just say something?
Oh, absolutely.
What I loved about that story was all the new words I learned. I learned that Twitch is a interactive program, and also swatting. I heard it on another
swatting,
program. Yeah, I didn't realize what it was, and now I know.
Yeah, swatting is the calling into the 911 using somebody else's name so they show up at your residence, but they're the one who staged the whole...
And emergency rooms and police, so I like that about it. So thank you, Keith.
We can still learn.
And we can see a picture of Carla.
Because Ann supplied one for us. Okay, all yours.
All right. On to more delightful stories. Not really, but organizers have canceled a free concert in New Orleans. upcoming LGBTQ festival of Southern decadence due to the threat of monkeypox.
Yeah.
The larger 6-day festival will continue as it has since 1973. So that must have been one of the really early
Yeah, I remember
parades.
Southern
In
Decadence.
1973 was the first one.
Yep.
When we were living in the
So-
French Quarter.
Yeah, everybody used to march by. It was great.
Yeah.
Ex-Trump lawyer Jenna Ellis is still attacking the LGBT community. A judge in Colorado ordered Ellis to appear before a grand jury investigation on whether Trump and others illegally tried to influence the outcome of the 2020 election in Georgia. But instead of focusing on her legal obligations, she is stigmatizing monkeypox and criticizing Rachel Maddow and the way she dresses.
Oh, for heaven's sakes.
I know. A swastika was painted on Atlanta's iconic rainbow crosswalk. Police are still investigating that incident. Wisconsin School Board puts a ban on pride displays and preferred pronouns. The Kettle Marion District says teachers and staff cannot display pride flags or symbols of any kind. There was a large vocal opposition to this policy, but the school board passed it anyway. Drag race star Chanel is accused of stealing hundreds during the show. The video on TikTok seems to show the former contestant taking money from a woman's purse at a drag brunch. Oh. 3 men are killed in a hit and run outside a black-owned gay bar, Jeffrey Pub in Chicago. The attack appears to be caused by a fight that started inside the bar. The incident seems it was intentional and caused by a fight inside the bar when one of the parties rammed into 4 men. The car has been recovered, but the man is still on the run. So, GOP candidate said it's totally just to stone gay people to death. Scott Esk, 56, is in a primary runoff for a state house seat.
What state?
I don't know.
I
forgot.
His opening query was, is it homophobic if I think that
That's right, but I can't.
gay people could be stoned because, it's biblical?
When asked about this, Stan, he said, I think we would be totally in the right to do this.
What's his name?
Scott Esk, E-S-K. Ignoring as a nation things that are worthy of death is very amiss.
Oklahoma, which also has primaries today.
Oklahoma, we'll see if he wins. Representative party officials post an image of KKK hoods on social media in Lawrence County, Alabama, and on its Facebook account. Lgbtq state lawmakers are concerned about the future of same-sex marriage in Georgia. Representative Jenna was the first gay lawmaker in the state when she took office in 2001. In 2004, voters approved an amendment to ban same-sex marriage, making marriage between a man and a woman. Representative Jenna has been organizing around this issue in hopes that she can stop what may go on to the Supreme Court at some point, and then there'll be a states' right issue. So she's trying to deal with this now, but we'll see how that goes. Okay, Ian.
Okay, we're back in Asia. I have a lot to cover, starting with the Maldives, which is in the Indian Ocean. And this story was such a revelation. Apparently, the religious Muslim, it's a southern Asian state in the Indian Ocean, And police are investigating dozens of individuals and have sought to frame charges against 3 men arrested in July, including a police officer and the brother of a prominent politician who was former president and current Speaker of Parliament for homosexuality. The inquiries were apparently based on leaked videos that allegedly depicted the men having sex with a Bangladeshi man who had been arrested on July 12th. If convicted, the men can face up to 8 years in prison and 1,100 lashes. 38 people have been identified as having had sexual relationships with this Bangladeshi man, and they would all be prosecuted. The authorities have seized passports, and this is awful, but what I found also interesting is that the government is facing backlash from extremist Islamic groups for detaining over 20 people, including 2 religious leaders and a former member of parliament for their involvement in a violent attack on an event celebrating International Yoga Day. The government officials said, the extremists said, that Yoga Day is a heretical celebration of idolatry or polytheism. On July 25th, the party, a partner in the ruling coalition whose leader is the Minister of Home Affairs, declared yoga forbidden. So there's no yoga. And this arrest of all these gay men is terrible too. Prior to the return of the Maldives Penal Code in 2014, same-sex relationships were only regulated under Islamic or Sharia law. Now, under the revised code, a section punishes sexual intercourse with the person of the same sex with up to 8 years in prison. So there's a lot of turmoil in the Maldives. Now, one more Asian story, which is late breaking. Singapore has announced that it will repeal the law criminalizing its sodomy law. It's a half-hearted concession to the LGBTQ community. The Prime Minister announced, and I saw this on Democracy Now!, Singapore would repeal a law that criminalizes sex between men, but it wasn't all good news because he also said that marriage, the city-state would abolish the law because it was the right thing to do, but marriage will remain as the union of a woman and a man. So activists are really discouraged by this because they say it really makes it worse. Let's turn to a picture of Australian rugby champion and gold medalist Elia Green, who has come out as transgender. And Elia Green is unusual in the field. There aren't too many people who have declared being transgender. Green is the only 3rd Olympian gold medalist to ever come out as transgender, along with Caitlyn Jenner and Canadian soccer player Quinn. He has no rugby-related plans in the near future. So he's going to focus on his life with partner Vanessa Turnbull Roberts and being a full-time dad to their newborn child. And let me round up my headlines, which I'm still doing, with Nigeria. You know, when I was last on the show many weeks ago, I talked about the activism, LGBTQ activism in Nigeria, and then Susan followed up with the death sentence of 3 men under Sharia law. And now Nigerian police are investigating a gay dating app scam. And the police have urged users of a gay dating app who may have been scammed to come forward. But so far, they've refused to give the victims any amnesty from anti-gay laws. So they're not going to come forward. Are you crazy? Nevertheless, 6 of the scammers have been arrested. The gang lured people on dates and then held them hostage, took all their money from the ATM, and so forth. So in Nigeria, under the Criminal Code and Same-Sex Marriage Act of 2013, same-sex relations and LGBTQ advocacy are banned. You can get 14 years in prison. But now I'd like to go back, if I may, if I have time.
You have a little bit.
To Tom Daly.
What about your clip? Do you have another clip?
Yes, you anticipate. Yes, my clip concerns Tom Daly. But first, let us take a look at a picture of him and talk a little about this documentary. It's praised for being, it's called Illegal to Be Me. It's been praised as brave and inspiring. In this film, he highlights the homophobic laws that still exist in more than half of the Commonwealth countries. He explored the topic in this film that shows the 28-year-old traveling to countries such as Jamaica and Pakistan to meet with LGBTQ+ athletes affected by the legislation that is homophobic. The documentary was on BBC. It emphasized that 35 out of 54 countries that competed at the Commonwealth Games still have anti-LGBT laws in place. It's been met with widespread acclaim by viewers, with many noting Daly's fearless approach to the subject as a highlight of the episode. Utmost respect for Tom Daly using his position to push for change and respect for LGBTQ rights, they say. Aired the day after the Commonwealth Games drew to a close. And this is an interesting thing too. The Commonwealth Games are a sports competition in the Commonwealth nations that occur every 4 years. And this time it was in Birmingham. So this film was aired the day after the Games. It also gave insight into the moment Daly led athletes onto the opening ceremony as they waved the pride flag. And that's what I'd like you to look at now, this moving ceremony.
I want other sporting events to take note because we're not going anywhere.
Hello, Birmingham, you all right?
We are ready.
Let's go.
This is what we've been working towards, this huge moment of visibility for LGBT people across the Commonwealth to feel seen and to feel acknowledged.
Over 7,000 baton bearers have carried the Queen's baton across the Commonwealth in the name of their chosen cause. And now, completing this epic journey, please welcome our final baton bearers, starting with 5 times Commonwealth medal winner for diving, Tom Daly. Tom is running in support of LGBT+ rights, and tonight has been joined by flag bearers representing some of the 35 Commonwealth countries where homosexuality is still a crime. He runs in solidarity with all LGBT+ athletes and communities.
This was an incredibly emotional moment, but this wasn't about me. This is about every single LGBT person around the Commonwealth, around the world, that they might have seen that tonight and been given a little bit of hope. Even if it can make the smallest difference to someone out there, it was all worth it, because someone today might have seen that and felt a little less alone in the world. Big things come from small beginnings. And today, the Commonwealth Games made history. But the Olympics, the Football World Cup, and Formula One still have a long way to go. I just see this as the start. I want other sporting events to take note because we're not going anywhere.
Well, thank you. That's very...
I was going to say, I think the last story we had on Tom Daly was the pictures of when he was competing in the Olympics and he was sitting there knitting. Right? And everyone was just obsessed with it.
Yeah.
And when I saw that clip, I thought, how many people on this stage are openly coming out in a country that criminalizes homosexuality? Exactly. I mean, there's so much. It was so moving. I hope you liked it, audience. Okay.
And I wanted to say, this show airs Saturday, so there's a Sunday get-together from Momentum at...
the Red Hen.
The Red Hen.
At 11 o'clock.
At 11 o'clock. So anybody who would like to join us, I'm going to go.
I might go too, even though it's early in the morning.
We will be there.
That's the middle of the night for you. Yeah. Well, I was going to say, on the last show, I had made the comment of I hadn't seen where all of the Momentum events were in the Burlington area. There was nothing that was happening in central Vermont, so that's encouraging to hear. I was also going to ask you, Rainbow Umbrella and the book discussion groups and women's groups will be starting up again.
The women's discussion group is going to be September 28th.
Okay, so the end of the month.
And the book group is this Saturday. So, and what are we reading?
We're reading Maggie Terry by Sarah Schulman.
Right.
And it's on Zoom, so you don't have to go anywhere.
Ooh.
And so if anybody's interested in an LGBT book group, you can get in touch with Rainbow Umbrella or Central Vermont.
That's right.
So, okay. We're going to go to Keith now.
So August 1976, in our youth. UCLA study, lesbian mothers? Their finding was that the sexual orientation of the mothers didn't seem to have any demonstrative influence on the sexual orientation of their children.
Well,
so
I could have told them that.
Well, and I had folded it in as a sort of a counterpoint to the grooming accusations.
What year was this?
1976.
Wow.
Yeah,
I
that's
wonder
early
what
on.
inspired them. That's really early.
And I'd like to highlight that a story that I'm sure you know about, that 1,043 LGBTQ candidates are running for office.
It's not that they're running, it's that they have already been elected.
Ah, well, even better.
There were...
I was surprised you didn't have that. Tell us.
No, I had it down here, but I was being conscious of time.
Well, look, we have time.
So we have time. 22 states have more LGBTQ plus elected officials than they did in 2021. 10 states have less. The election of non-cisgender LGBTQ plus officials has outpaced that of cisgender LGBTQ plus officials, increasing by 13.2% versus 4.3%.
That's interesting.
So there is momentum. People are working. And this was from the Victory Fund, who they make it a point to go out and support. Yeah, the 1,043 held office in 2022, which is up from 986 the year before. That's significant.
Isn't it?
That's so.
Delightful. That's an optimistic.
That's a good place for us to end.
That's right.
Welcome back, Pollyanna.
Thank you.
And on that note, always remember to resist.